Hi everyone, in this lesson we're going to look at calculating the percentage of an amount, and we're going to do this without a calculator in this lesson. So our first question says find 25% of 160, and there are a few percentage equivalencies that we need to be really comfortable with, and one of them is 25%. So to find 25% we divide by 4. So I've just written that, to find 25% we divide by 4. Let's take our 160 and we'll divide it by 4. Quick mental tip to do this, do 16 divided by 4. Of course that gives you 4. Therefore 160 divided by 4 must be 40. I'll just put that as an answer. I'll say 25% of 160 is equal to 40. Okay, next example. So find 10%. Again, 10% is one of those ones we need to know. We divide by 10 to find 10%. And the reason for that is if we imagine we start with 100%, we want to go to 10%. Well, how do you go from 100% to 10%? You divide by 10. So that's the reason why dividing by 10 finds us 10%, because we start with 100%. So to find 10% of 45, I'm going to divide 45 by 10. And that gives me an answer of 4.5. Putting that into a final sentence, I've said 10% of 45 is equal to 4.5. Last one, it says find 5%. Now there is actually a way we can do this by dividing directly. We can divide by 20. So to find 5% we divide by 20, but more likely you would actually find 10% and then half it. So let's do the way that is more likely. So 10% of 80 is equal to 80 divided by 10, which is equal to 8. And then therefore it follows that 5% of 80 is going to be half of 10%. Well, 10% of 80 was 8. So 5% of 80 must be half of 8. 8 divided by 2, which is 4. So 5% of 80 is 4. And of course, that would also work if we had divided by 20. So to find 5%, we divide by 20. If we'd done 80 divided by 20, that also gives us a value of 4. So before you give these questions a go, just to make you aware, to find 50%, we divide by 2. To find 20%, we divide by 5. And we've already talked about how we find 5%. So pause the video, give these 3 a go, and then we'll look at them together. So it says find 50% of 130. I'm just going to show you a different way you can lay this out, which might be helpful. We can start by saying that 100% is equal to 130, and we want to find 50%. Well, we can see that we would scale down by dividing by 2 to go from 100% to 50%. So that's why we divide 130 by 2. And you'd set up your short division off to the side and do that. So 2 goes into 13 6 times to give us 12 with 1 left over. 2 goes into 10 5 times. So 50% is 65. Find 20% of 55. So again, 100% is equal to 55. To find 20%, we divide by 5, because that's how you go from 100 to 20. And so therefore I need to divide 55 by 5, which gives me an answer of 11. So 20% is 11. The last one, 5% of 240. Well, 100% is what we start with. That's the 240. Let's scale down to 10%. Well, to do that, I would divide by 10. So I will divide 240 by 10 to give me 24. And 5% is half of 10%. So I would divide by 2. I'll divide 24 by 2 to give me an answer of 12. 5% is equal to 12. Our next example is a little bit trickier. We're going to use the building blocks that we looked at in the first few examples. So it says find 35% of 320. The first thing I want to do is actually construct 35%. Think about what percentages would I need to add together to get this. And of course, there are different answers to that. One way that we can get 35% is by adding 25% and 10% together. That's one option. The other option would be to get 10% and have 3 of those. Okay, that would give me to 30% and then add on 5%. Or one other way would be to find 5% and then multiply that by 7. So as you can see, there are different ways that we could build 35%. I'm going to go with this first one just for this example. So let's start off by finding 25%. And we can say 25% is equal to £320 divided by 4. So 25% is equal to, do 32 divided by 4 to give you 8. and then use your related calculation. If you know 32 divided by 4 is 8, 320 divided by 4 must be 10 times larger, it must be 80. That's your 25%. Then we'll look at 10%. So remember, we divide by 10 to get 10%. So take your £320, divide it by 10, and that gives you £32. So 10% is £32. Then what I can say is that 35% is equal to 25%, add 10%. So 35% is equal to 25%. Well, we said that was 80. And then we're going to add 10%, which we said was £32. And we'll add these together. So 35% is equal to the sum of these. Let's set up our column addition off to the side. So we'll do 80, add 32, and that gives you an answer of 112. So 35% is £112. Pause the video and give this question a go, and then we'll look at it together. Okay, so we want to find 45% of 160. Let's start by thinking of different ways that we can get 45%. I can see that that would be 20%, add 25%, that's one way. Another way would be to get 5% and then multiply that by 9. And we can actually go above 45%, so we could work out 50% and then take away 5%. So hopefully you can see there's lots of different ways to do it. You might have picked one of those or something different. I'm going to go with the first option. So we will find 20% first. Well, to do that, we divide by 5. I'll take my 160, divide it by 5. Off to the side, I'll do that calculation very quickly. 5 goes into 16 3 times to give me 15 with 1 left over. 5 goes into 10 twice. So 20% is £32. And then, because I'm doing this first one, I need to find 25%. So 25%, we divide by 4. So take my 160, divide it by 4. Well, 16 divided by 4 is 4. Therefore, 160 divided by 4 is 40. So 25% is £40. 45% is going to be the sum of 20% and 25%, sorry. That's going to be equal to 20%, which was £32, add £40, which means 45% is equal to £72. So another method that can be quite helpful is what's called the unitary method. It's important to understand what that actually means. Unit means one. So think of a unicycle or the universe. That prefix means one. So the unitary method is actually finding 1%. And if you imagine, we always start with 100%. To get to 1%, I would need to divide by 100. So it says find 3% of 250 grams. Well, we'll say 100% is equal to 250 grams. And to get 1% of something, we always divide by 100, and you can see why that's the case there on the left. I'll do my 250 grams divided by 100. 250 divided by 100 is 2.5 grams. And it says find 3%, so I can scale my 1% up to whatever I want. I'm going to multiply it by 3 to get to 3%. So I need to multiply this side by 3 as well. So I'll do 2.5 multiplied by 3. 3 multiplied by 5 is 15. Exchange that 1. 3 multiplied by 2 is 6. Add on the 1 is 7. So 3% is 7.5 grams. Give this question a go and use the unitary method to do it. Okay, let's look at your answer. So 100% was equal to 600 kilograms. And we want to find 7%, but we're going to use the unitary method. So we're going to go to 1% first. Of course, we divide by 100 to do that. I'll divide 600 by 100, which gives me 6 kilograms. 1% 6 kilograms. I want to find 7%. I need to multiply by 7. So 6 kilograms multiplied by 7 is 42 kilograms, and that should have been your answer. Okay, we'll look at some harder examples where we have to be a little bit more creative as to how we get to our number. So this one says find 87% of 450. And like before, off to the side, I'm just going to think of some ways that I can get 87%. Well, one way that springs to my mind is to get 90% and then take away 3%. So that would work. Another way to get 87% would be to get to 80% and then add on 7%. And of course, we could get to 80% by doing 4 20%, and we could get to 7% by doing 7 1%. Another way to get 87% would be to get 75%, and then add on 5%, and then add on 7%. And of course, there would be different ways, but just having a look at the different options, I actually like this first option. It's quite straightforward. I'm going to do 90% take away 3%. So I'll start by saying this. 87% is equal to 9 multiplied by 10%. That's how I'm going to get my 90%. And then I'm going to have to take away 3 multiplied by 1%. So just defining, that's my 90%, that's my 3%. And I've got 2 building blocks in order to do that. I need to find 10% and I need to find 1%. Let's go ahead and do that. 10% is equal to my number, which is 450 pounds in this case, divided by 10. So 10% is 45 pounds. And then 1% is 450 divided by 100. So 1% is equal to £4.50. And now that I've got my 10% and my 1%, I can start to construct what I want. Let's start by looking at 90%. So 90% is going to be 9 multiplied by 10%, which was 45. And again, it's non-calculator, so we'll have to do this calculation. 45 multiplied by 9. Well, 9 multiplied by 5 is 45. And then 9 multiplied by 4 is 36. Add on this 4 to give me 40. So 9 multiplied by 45 is 405 pounds. That's the 90%. Let's get our 3%. Well, that's going to be 3 lots of 1%, which we said was £4.50. And so we'll do £4.50 multiplied by 3. So 3 multiplied by 0 is 0. 3 multiplied by 5 is 15. Carry over that 1. 3 multiplied by 4 is 12. Add on the 1 to give me 13. So £13.50. I have my 90%. I have my 3%. I then need to subtract those to get 87%. I'm going to clear this away to get a bit more room. So I've just restated what we had before. 87% is equal to 90% take away 3%. Therefore, we can say that 87% is equal to what we said 90% was, so that's the £405. Subtract the 3%, which we said was £13.50. And let's go ahead, set up our column subtraction and do that. I'm going to do a little bit of rough work on it over here. So set up my 405, going to put down some decimal points, and then put my £13.50 underneath, and I'm taking these away. A little bit of harder column subtraction. 0 subtract 0 is 0. 0 subtract 5, I can't do that, so I need to exchange 1 unit for 10 tenths. 10 subtract 5 is 5. 4 subtract 3 is 1. And again, another problem, I can't do 0 subtract 1, so I'm going to have to exchange one of my hundreds for 10 tens. 10 subtract 1 is 9, and 3 subtract nothing is 3. So my answer is £391.50. So let's come back over here and finish our question. 87% is equal to £391.50. So a bit of a harder one, but hopefully you can see how we got there. Okay, pause the video and give this harder example a go. So find 34% of £120. 34% we could get by doing 30% add 4%. So let's go ahead and say that 34% is equal to, well, 30% is 3 lots of 10%. Then we're going to have to add on 4%, which is 4 lots of 1%. So 1% and 10% are my building blocks, like in the previous question. So 10% is equal to 120 divided by 10. So 10% is equal to £12. And 1%, I can actually go straight from 10% to 1%. I'd divide by 10 to go from 10% to 1%. So I need to divide this by 10. And that gives me £1.20. Now our building blocks to get 34% were 30% and 4%. So let's work out those. 30% is going to be 3 multiplied by 10%. So 3 multiplied by 12. That means 30% is equal to £36. And 4% is going to be 4 lots of 1%. So 4 lots of £1.20. Again, we can use a little bit of common sense and related calculations. Do 4 multiplied by 12 to give you 48. And then use a bit of common sense to know that 4 times £1.20 is not going to be £48, but £4.80. So my 4% is £4.80. 34% is 30% and 4% added together. So I'll say 34% is equal to £36. Add on my £4.80. I'll set up my column subtraction for that. You might not need to do this, and that's okay. 8 and 0 is 8. 4 and 6 is 10. Carry over that one. And 3 and 1 is 4. So my answer is 34% is equal to £40.80. Remember, with money, we do need those 2 decimal places. All right, let's have a look at our next example. It says find 33.3 recurring percent of 330. We need to recognize that 33.3 recurring percent is equal to 1/3 as a fraction, or 0.3 recurring as a decimal, but this fraction's maybe the most helpful way of thinking about it. Remember, we always say that our starting value is 100%, so 100% is equal to £330. And just to show you how we go to 33.3 recurring percent, well, we would multiply by 1/3. A third of 100 is 33.3 recurring. Therefore, we need to multiply £330 by 1/3. Multiplying by a third is the same thing as dividing by 3. So I'm going to divide 330 by 3. Set up your short division off to the side. 330 divided by 3. 3 goes into 33 11 times. 3 goes into 0 0 times. So 33.3 recurring percent is £110. Give this question a go and think about what 12.5% would be as a fraction. That'll help you to do this. So hopefully you were able to spot that 12.5% is equal to the decimal 0.125. If you can't see how I did that, I divided by 100 to change from a percentage to a decimal. And then I need to know that this is 1/8 as a fraction. So I'll start by saying 100% is equal to £64. And to go from 100% to 12.5%, I multiply by 1/8. So I want to multiply 64 by 1/8 as well. Of course, multiplying by 1/8 is the same thing as dividing by 8. 64 divided by 8 is £8. The other way to do this question is to work out 25%. And to do that, we divide by 4. So 25% is equal to 16. 64 divided by 4 is. And then 12.5% is half of 25%. So we'd need to half our 16 to get us to £8. And the relationship between 25 and 12.5% should make sense when we consider that 25% is 1/4 and 12.5% is 1/8. And if we divided a quarter into 2, we would get 1/8. The last harder example that we're going to look at is find 115% of £480. The first thing to say is, because I'm finding 115%, my final answer should be greater than the £480, because remember, that is 100%. So when you get your answer, you need to be expecting something bigger than this. Let's start off by defining what 115% would be equal to. Well, it would be equal to 100% add 15%. And I could get 15% by doing 3 multiplied by 5%. So that's my building block, 5%. Let's work out what that would be. To work out 5%, I'm going to start by working out 10%. So 10% is equal to 480 divided by 10. 10% is equal to £48. 5% is going to be half of that. So 48 divided by 2. So 5% is equal to £24. Then I can go ahead and get my 15%. So 15% is 3 lots of 5%, which we said was 24 pounds. So my rough working out, I'll do 24 multiplied by 3. 3 multiplied by 4 is 12, carry over that 1. 3 multiplied by 2 is 6, add on 1 gives me 7. So 15% is 72 pounds. 115% then is going to be equal to 100%. Add on my 15%. 100%, I don't have to do anything to work that out. It's what they give me in the question. It's the 480 pounds. My 15% is the 72 pounds over here. And then I'll just add those together. So 480, add my 72. 2 and 0 is 2. 8 and 7 is 15. Carry over that 1. 4 and 1 is 5. So my answer is 15%, or sorry, 115% is equal to 552 pounds. And like we said at the beginning, we're expecting a final answer that's greater than 480. And of course, that's what we see. So we know we've probably done it right. Pause the video and give this one a go. So find 203% of 230 pounds. We can get 203% by finding 200% and then adding on 3%. 200% is just going to be 2 lots of 100%. And 3% is going to be 3 lots of 1%. My building block is 1% in this case. 100% is equal to 230 pounds. And remember, we say always to get 1%, we always divide by 100. So we'll divide 230 by 100 to give us £2.30. And we want to get 3%, so we want to multiply that by 3. So by 3. And that should have given you £6.90. 203% then is equal to 100% multiplied by 2. Add on my 3% like this. 100% multiplied by 2 is going to be £230. That's my 100%. I need to multiply that by 2. That gives me an answer of £460. That's 460. Add on 3%, which we worked out to be £6.90. So 203% is equal to £466.90. Well done if you got that question right. If you're using our lesson booklets, now complete exercises 1 to 5. Thank you for watching the video.